Hi everybody, and welcome to my first video. Today we'll be painting the Reaper Nagendra warrior, or as most people might know them, Yanti. Now, I picked these up back in the Bones for Kickstarter, and I think that was delivered about a year ago now, maybe a little bit more. I think these are actually really cool figures. There are not a ton of Snake People minis out there, and I thought they would be a good place to start for this channel. Now, as you can see here, these actually came as a set of 6, but this video is just going to focus on the first one, and I hope to do all of them later. So I've prepped these by doing a Zen of the Prime. You might also know that by the term undercoating or value sketching. Basically, it is a quick gradient that goes from black, grey, white, and you bring out the details on the mini before you paint it. There are a bunch of videos out there on YouTube about how to do it, so I won't cover it here, but I will talk about why I've done it, and there's really 2 reasons. The first is that hopefully some of the highlights and shadows should show through the colour when I'm done. And secondly, it gives me a much better idea of where to put the shadows and highlights myself when I'm actually painting. So let's look at the colours we'll be using. I will be using different colours for the other figures, but for this one, I wanted to start with green because I got these new scale 75 green paints just before the COVID pandemic ruined everything, and they've been sat unused in my cupboard since March. So this is a great chance to try them out. Haven't really decided on the colours for the other figures yet, but I will probably go for a mix. For the body of this figure, we will be using greens and yellows, and these are on screen now. They are scale colour Ardennes green, black forest green, boreal green, errati green, and spring green. The leather will be a mix of Vallejo earth and bone white. And for the yellow paints, we will be using Vallejo Desert Yellow and Scale Colour Soul Yellow. Now, you'll see here that some of these are called Game Air. This is Vallejo's airbrush brand. They are primarily meant to be applied through an airbrush, but you can also just brush them on by hand. They tend to be a lot thinner than regular paints that are not pre-thinned, so I will probably need to do a couple of coats, as you will see in the video. For the metallics, I will be using Vallejo Metal Colour, Gold, Steel, and Silver, and these are also primarily designed to go through an airbrush, but you can brush them on just fine, and they cover fantastically well. In my opinion, they are some of the best metallics that you can get. For the wash, I'll be using a single shade this time. I don't have a picture of it, but it is the Citadel Agrax Earth shade. So almost as soon as we begin, I realised my first mistake, which is that green paint against a green backdrop might not have been the best idea, but it is too late for me to change it now, so I am sorry. What I'm doing here is starting by painting the green shadows with black forest green, and doing a little bit of what's called wet blending into the next shade up, which is the lighter boreal green. At this point, I'm just trying to get all of the figure covered. I can come back and clean things up later. If you have never done wet blending, you basically apply the first colour, and while it is still wet, you then apply your second colour, and you can blend them very easily along the edge. You get a very smooth transition as long as the paint doesn't dry out. At this point, I realised the minuscule brush that I was using just wasn't getting the job done, so I had to swap to something bigger. This is just a simple angled brush. It's a cheapo brush. I just got it online. Probably didn't cost me more than a couple of quid. Nothing special at all. If you have never used Scale 75 paints, they do behave a little bit differently to regular acrylics, and this gave me a bit of a learning curve here. It's almost like the medium they use is different, and it is a gel-like fluid rather than just a regular liquid that you would get with a Vallejo or a Games Workshop paint. So there's a little bit of learning for me to do. Next up is the belly, where I am blending the Vallejo Earth into the Desert Yellow colours. And as I said earlier, these paints are quite thin, they're quite transparent. It's going to take a couple of coats to get this done. And you can see I go back in now with a smaller brush, and I'm just tidying the edges back up really with the same base green, just trying to keep things a little bit neat for later on. When that's done, I'll move on to the shield. And this is where I swap to the metallic paints, and this shield, as you can see, has these very interesting indentations and design on it, which I chose to paint gold. And the reason I did that is there's a lot of yellow in the body of the Mini, and I wanted to try and balance it out visually a little bit. The easiest way to do that was to just bring that yellow out into the shield with the gold paint. And in this clip, I'm also going in with the steel and silver on the braces. So coming back the next day, I actually wasn't very happy with the dark areas that were supposed to be the shadows, so I am going to go back in and just touch them up with the Ardennes Green. This colour actually got added later. All I'm doing here is picking the shadowed parts of the Mini, the darker parts, applying the Ardennes Green, and then cleaning off the brush and just blending that out into the rest of the existing colour. Next up is the shield, and this is really just a base coat for this area. I'm going to try to avoid hitting the gold that I painted a few minutes ago and just go in with the steel and just get the main metallic paint on there. Once that's dry, we'll be moving on to the wash, which is going to be Agrak's Earthshade, and I did have to give a little bit of thought to this. A lot of people would go straight for a black shade. I know non-oil is a fan favourite amongst the mini painting community, but my concern with using that here is that it really would have just made it look dirty. If you take a shadow of green and yellow and darken those down, naturally it would probably be more brown than black, so that is why I went towards Agrak's. So the next step is to add some highlights back onto the metal and onto the leather. The wash has a real tendency to darken everything down, especially if you cover the whole mini, and the highlights can get washed out, so now we need to bring those back. I'm going in here with the metallic steel and just highlighting the outer rim of that shield and also the interior pattern design to make that look a little bit more newer. I think if this was in combat, that would see the brunt of the blows, and it would probably be a little bit more polished than the recessed areas. I'm also coming back in here with the gold and just touching up the decorations, including the one in the middle of the shield. Up next is more highlighting through a technique called dry brushing. If you've painted a mini or two, you will know what it is. If you don't, then it is basically a technique whereby you get a dry brush and you work the paint into the bristles, and then you rub off most of that paint onto a kitchen towel or a piece of paper, so there's only very little amount of paint remaining on the bristles. You then come in and you just start to work the brush back and forth across the surface of the miniature, and the paint will hit only the highlighted areas. So I'm using this on the raised areas, working up through lighter colours. I'm starting here with erratic green, working up to spring green just at the very top where the light would hit the mini from above, and as you can see, it adds a bunch of really nice looking highlights. I'm also going to try and add some highlights into the leather a little bit, with some of the bone going into the earth, and also back onto the other metal components such as the sword and the shoulder pauldrons. There's really only a couple of things left to call this mini complete, or that a stage I'm happy with. The first one is the yellows on the body, and I feel like they've really got toned down from the wash, so I'm going to come back in, touch those up with some more desert yellow, and I will be working up to the soul yellow at this point as well. I'm going to do this through a combination of combining the two paints together, 50-50, and then finish with a little dry brushing of the soul yellow on top, and it should just bring that belly back up in brightness a little bit. So at this point I'm pretty happy with how it's turned out, and all that's left is the base, and to clean that up a little bit. This is really simple. I'm just using black paint and giving it a couple of coats. Not really going to do any other decoration other than that. I would like to keep the focus on the figure. I'm not a huge fan of basing. I may get to it one day, but for now I will just keep things simple. And at this point, I think I'm ready to call it done. So I hope you found this video helpful. Do let me know in the comments below if you have any suggestions, or if there's anything else you would like to know more about or see more of, and hopefully this will be the first video of many to come. Thank you for watching.